Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, back with our intro music from the 40s, our target demo. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, PurpleTerritoryRadio.com, and a crushing amount of debt, here with, as always, Mr. Joe Oberly.
I'm the Joe that doesn't know nothing from the opening song. So that's me.
Playing the brass instruments. Joe is the editor of the aforementioned network, and we have a very special guest with us this morning, a Mr. Sage Rosenfels.
What's up, guys? Thanks. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on this morning or at midnight or whenever we can say we're recording this thing so people can listen to it whenever they want.
Listen to that voice, Joe. Listen to his voice. He puts both of ours to shame. Is that not a radio voice or what? Right? Sage Rosenfels. How about that? Yeah. You're doing that now, aren't you, Sage? You're on the air quite a bit.
I do have a lot of radios now. Well, I live in Omaha, Nebraska. So there's not an NFL city nearby. There's really not even a college football team nearby other than University of Nebraska, which is one of the last teams in the country that I'd ever want to cover in any way, being them and Iowa State Cyclones. So the only way I can really work in the media is really from my home. Of course, I get up to Minneapolis a lot, in particular during the football season, probably twice a month. I do get to maybe a half dozen games, a year. But so much of my work is doing a lot of radio shows. Just like right now, I'm sitting in my bed with a cup of coffee next to me, watching TV with my computer on my lap, and doing this show. But I do 3 days a week with the Score North up in Minneapolis.
Nice.
1500, and I do a Monday and Wednesday show for an hour with Matthew Collar, which I really do enjoy. And then Thursdays I go on with Mackie and Judd at 4:30. So 2:00, Monday, Wednesday, and then 4:30 with Mackie and Judd. I also do a show in Chicago on Tuesdays for 670 The Score in Chicago, where I break down the Bears offense and Trubisky. I also do an Iowa radio show on Monday nights during the college football season. They call it the Cyhawk Reaction Show. So I'm sort of the Cyclone football analyst, and Chuck Long, one of my idols growing up in Eastern Iowa, the old Iowa quarterback, he does the Iowa side. So we sort of go back and forth. And of course, you have a lot of call-in questions, both Iowa and Iowa State fans. So other than that, and those are, I would say, the majority of my paid radio work. I do other radio shows all over the country. Whether I get a call from my buddy, Ross Tucker, or somebody at Sirius XM, or a lot of times since I have inside information sometimes on teams like San Francisco because I played for Kyle Shanahan, or even the LA Rams because I know Sean McVay well. Sometimes I get phone calls sometimes from those markets, San Francisco or Green Bay with Matt LaFleur. I'll get a Milwaukee radio show that I'll just do because sometimes I'll know a little bit extra information, and I understand their offense as well and who they are and how they coach and all those things. So I stay busy, and I write articles too. I haven't written as many this year. It's every year is different. I think one year I wrote up to probably 35 I think one year I wrote 45 articles. I probably wrote as much as 60 articles one year, and this year I'm probably going to write a half a dozen or something. So that sort of year by year thing, I do enjoy that, and writing articles is, I guess, how I got into the media business after my playing career was done.
All that radio stuff just in preparation for coming on to Morning Joe's, right? That's all coming to this apex right here. Yeah.
Crushing amount of pressure. I'm clearly handling it well. We chatted about this briefly before we started the show. what is that transition like, going from a player to someone in the sports media market? I'm sure it's more of a left turn for some players who might not get along with the media, or who kind of feel like it's pulling teeth to answer questions from the media. I know in preparation for this show, Joe said that talking to you was always just awful. I'm totally kidding, but yeah, is it a strange transition for you?
I think almost every player goes through some transition when they leave the game and they go, okay, what am I going to do next? And there are some players, a few players who, they can't wait to get into, real estate or something that they want to get into. They know what they want to do when they're done, or maybe they dabble in it a little bit in the off season, even during their playing days. But for most guys, to be in the NFL, it's such a tough competitive league that you really do have to spend a lot of your physical time and your mental time and your emotional time trying to be the best player you can be. And that is really where you put so much time and energy. And so when you're done doing that, it can be a really hard transition to not have a super detailed plan of your everyday life. I mean, you got to realize, you go to high school, as we all know, you wake up at 6:30 or 7:00, and you get to the school, and maybe you have practice beforehand, but you have this schedule pretty much, almost 7 days a week, it seems like, and 24 hours a day of, tomorrow morning I got school, and then I got practice after school, and then we got a game, and then I got this, and you get a little bit of friend time, but your life is very regimented. Then you go to college, and it becomes almost more regimented in a strange way, because you might have 7 a.m. lifting, then you have a 9 o'clock class, and then you've got this, then you got lunch, and then you got another class, then you got practice afterwards. And then, if you don't get good grades, you might have like some sort of study table thing or whatever. So, and you have and since football has so many people involved in it on a team, this is not tennis, right? You can't sort of set your own schedule. This is like a very small army, and you have your leader, and everything has to be sort of by the minute. At 9 o'clock, this meeting starts. It's going to go for 20 minutes. At 9:25, this meeting starts. And blah 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 blah, and things are very regimented all the way through. I mean, you should see when you go to an away game. They probably have an app now, but they used to hand you to put in your wallet a schedule of literally everything that's going to happen until you get back to your NFL city from a plane, and you literally get dropped off. Like, it's all set up and try to be timed out as much as possible. Of course, after the game, things don't always work out that way, but there's just a general, to keep everybody on the same page. Well, when you're done doing that, all of that is gone. All of that structure is gone.
Did you did you take comfort in that and miss that when you made the transition to where you didn't have that? I mean,
well, not only is all your structure gone, but all your real motivation is gone. I mean, it's, especially if you've sort of made enough money, it's like, what is the point of waking up at 6 o'clock and going and doing something really hard? I've made my money. The chances are I'm not going to make that type of money ever again. I can make more, but how hard do you want to work? And it's really easy to go like, I'm just going to sleep until 8:30 or 9 o'clock. Obviously you have other things you end up focusing on. Your kids is a great thing. I think of being an NFL player, former player. I'm so lucky. And my kids are a little bit older, 18, 15, and 10. I started very young. I was 23 when my son was born. But to have those kids to really dive into and coach their teams and their activities, and drive them to school and pick them up from school, man, you feel super lucky to be able to do that, right? That's a very lucky thing if you get to drive your kids to school, pick them up from school, coach them all the time, not miss that many games and practices. Most parents are working, and they just do have to miss a lot of things. It's just the way it is. So I'm pretty lucky that I probably get to 3/4, if not more, of my kids' things. And so what happens though, that sort of prevents you from having like a real 8 to 5 type of job, because you'd rather like sort of use some of that time, because you feel like you're sort of lucky or blessed or whatever you want to say. You feel like, man, I've got an advantage here in life, in the sense that I can actually do these things with my kids and have these special moments.
I used to work for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and one of the reasons I left is because I was missing out on that, and I took a different job and was able to coach, and it's a treat. It's a gift. It's something you don't get that time back if it slides past you. So I know
you don't get that time back, and working for a pro team, football team, or a basketball team, baseball team. I mean, what great jobs, right? They're fun. You're around something that people deem important. You show up to a stadium. If you work for the Twins, you're showing up 80 times a year or whatever, and then spring training, and people are excited, and there's 30,000 people there, and it's great to be a part of that. But it also means like you're working on Sundays, you're working on Saturdays, you're working on Wednesday nights randomly. Your life is not. It's the opposite of 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever people do now, right? I mean, you're really all over the place, and you don't get to decide the schedule. The team, the league, the games, that decides your life, and everyone, your wife, your kids, everyone has to be is affected by that, right? So you are, I think, falling into, if you get into the sports industry, working for actually one of the teams, whether it's a player, coach, your life is going to be very different than your classic, like if you work banker's hours, you're a dentist or something like that. Dentists don't have to work on Sunday nights, as far as I know. So
not the good ones.
It is. Yeah. So for me, trying to figure out what I want to do afterwards, and trying a couple things, you have an idea, you want to try that, then you realize, like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to start a company. I don't know how to create an app. I don't know, So I tried some various things and tried not to spend too much money on those fires that I was trying to see if they would go anywhere. And one of the things that it seemed like the more time I put into it, the better success I was having. And that was, for me, was doing what I know best, and what I spent all that time trying to understand and trying to know, which was football, and competing in sports. And that has been my life. I was a 5-sport athlete in high school, got one college scholarship, made the most of it, and had this long career. That's what I know best. It's not how to start a company or create an app or sell insurance. And that's not my specialty. I retired at 35. I'm 13 years behind all my friends in college who, graduated at 22 and went on to whatever respective jobs they had. They've got all this experience that I'm a 23-year-old intern, and I don't know how marketing has changed a lot in the last 12 years. That was my major, marketing, right? Yeah. So that's where it's really weird. You're behind everybody else. The longer you play, the more you're behind. But luckily, hopefully, you do well saving your money, and you don't need all of that. And so you figure out what you want to do. And for me, I wrote an article, and it got into Sports Illustrated not long after I retired. And that sort of slowly worked my way into some other articles and some podcasts. And, there's for a couple of years, I did a Vikings podcast. Then I'd do another radio show, and then somebody else would ask me, and then randomly, a Toronto radio station says, "Hey, we'd like to have you on, once a week." And then they, at some point you're like, well, it'd be nice to get paid for a lot of this stuff, right? So you turn into a business, and basically for them, a lot of times in my situation, I sort of pick and choose, what I want to talk about. If somebody's just going to see a show, like, I have other things to do. There's other things in my life that I could definitely be spending time on, other than talking on someone else's radio show for absolutely nothing on a regular basis. But I do get to pick and choose, and obviously the Vikings are my specialty. That's what my radio show is. That's what I write about. That's who I follow the closest. But the differences between me and somebody on the real beat, somebody really tied in, is, they're in the locker rooms all the time. They're at all the games. They're at all the locker room things afterwards. They go to the majority of those training camp practices and build those relationships in the locker room with those players. And I have some relationships with some of those guys in that locker room for sure. But I'm not an everyday, on the beat type of person. But what I get to do is, again, use that specialty that I have is I just have to watch the film.
Yeah.
That's all I have to watch. I don't have, as we all know, press conferences are sort of professional, not lying, but, sort of sidestepping, right? I mean, well, some of them are lying. And there's a lot of press conferences in this world. There's a lot of lies everywhere.
Sage Rosenfels said that.
Yeah, well, listen, don't get me started. But let's just say a Bill Belichick press conference or Eli Manning. They sort of try to say nothing. Right? They're not really lying. They're just not really saying anything. You know what I mean?
Speak.
Yeah. So you're not getting. Now there are some coaches who are a little bit, like maybe a Mike Tomlin or somebody, or Pete Carroll, that you could sort of get some good information about. They're sort of more,
Mike Zimmer.
Authentic, and they don't feel like they're giving up. I don't know. Zimmer's probably somewhere in the middle. I would say, but either way, you don't really get if you're going to write all your articles based off of what they say when they're trying to be sort of ambiguous and they're trying, for me, it's the film.
Yeah.
If a guy misses a throw, if a guy misses a block, if a guy consistently is missing blocks, or a guy got as safety is not in his correct spot on cover 2, and then somebody hits a hole shot, I can see that. And I can see if it was his fault, or is it the corner's fault, or was it, what happened there? Did the corner get a good chance? Most media members can't really see all that.
Right.
So they have to do the rest of it. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But because they're not experts in football.
You've been watching film for how many years? You're seasoned at it, and for all these guys that are breaking it down, they're going to miss stuff. They just don't have. Not
only that, is I've actually played for the coaches a lot of times. I've known Kevin Stefanski for 10 years. I've known Gary Kubiak for 14 years. I played for Cougs for 3 years. You don't think I know all the details of even the difference between the count for the offensive lineman in a screen to a tight end on a play action versus a screen to a running back is different. It's a 2-count screen to the running back. It's a 3-count screen to the tight end. Those details really help me as I watch film. I go, well, the tight end was too early. It looked like to me he was only sort of went on a 2-count when he blocked. He needs to hold that block a little bit longer, give his guys a chance. These are the things that I know that I think your classic sort of beat reporter, you just can't get. And so luckily, this media career is, for me, it's a home life career. I do it from my house. I can hang out, sleep in a little bit, have coffee, watch some film, go on, talk about it, and get paid to do it. And then, pick my kids up from school and drive them to school and make lunch and go for a walk. I don't have to go into an office. I guess I'm my own boss. And so it would probably help if I was a little bit more motivated. Like I was one of those people that was wanted to grind all day. But to be honest with you, I don't. I know when I watch the film, I know what I know. And I don't have to watch, 12 Oregon Ducks games to tell you a few things about Justin Herbert. I can literally watch 10 plays if I really need to. But I do like watching film. It's something that comes really easy to me. I know what I'm looking for. And also in film work, the game's always changing. There's just always things that you sort of that are new, that you learn, that you go, ooh, I like how they did that, or I like how he formationed that. Like the game is, and that's where it is fun, is that the game is always changing. So it's, if you're a curious person, you're curious to wonder, how did Kyle Shanahan or Gary Kubiak, how did they design that play? What they call that play? What's the protection they used? What were they looking for? What defense are they looking for? All those types of things that go into that maybe is something that, that I didn't see when I was playing 8 years ago.
So you're at home on your bed having a cup of coffee, so the coronavirus hasn't really affected your career much, has it? I'm just kidding.
By the way, my coffee cup says Super Dad as I'm looking at it. Just want you to know, I believe I got this for a Father's Day present years ago. Yeah, I've actually said to people, because my girlfriend in Minneapolis, she's a nurse. She's a nurse anesthetist, and she deals with people who may or may not, you don't know unless they show symptoms. So she has to deal with this every single day. Going to work cannot be fun in those situations. She cannot see her daughters for probably the next couple months is what we're thinking. Maybe go on walks or something, but she's basically self-quarantining because she doesn't know if she could get it at a hospital. All these hospital workers, even in a small town, so I look at myself, going back to your question, as like the luckiest person in this whole thing. I'm hanging out at my house. I'm mowing my yard. I'm doing radio shows and podcasts. My older sister, who has a disability, she was in a car accident when I was in 8th grade and has a brain injury. She's been living with me for the last 2.5 weeks. Of course, I got my kids. So I feel super, super lucky that I don't have to go into work. I can have my groceries delivered. I don't have to be a nurse in this scenario. That's got to be a scary situation. I'm hanging out talking about football, wondering, are we going to have this draft? And if we do, who the Vikings should draft and what are their needs? And man, they've got 2 corner spots. They got defensive end. I get to talk about that and not go into work and, wonder this one N95 mask that a lot of these nurses are having to deal one for like forever, like not for the day or for the patient, but one for until we can get more. You have one. And, So I feel myself, pretty lucky in this scenario.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that we contribute something as well. There's just a lot of people at home looking for things to read or to, get them through self-quarantining and social distancing. So I don't know. I feel like that we add some value in that regard as well.
Well, I think so. I mean, there's a couple of things that you add is that we are all in this thing together. So you guys are dealing with some of the same scenarios that everybody else is dealing with. And isolation does suck. That is one of the challenges sometimes of me having the career that I have or the lifestyle I have almost is that I'm hanging out in my house by myself a lot. My kids are in school. I'm doing these shows. It might be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't even seen anybody else that day. That's very different than walking into a football locker room at 7 o'clock in the morning and there's 90 guys in there and then there's, 20 coaches. Then you walk into a football facility, there's like 200 people that you're going to have some sort of contact with that day. And then next thing you know, it's 5 o'clock at night and you haven't seen anybody all day. It's a little bit different, right? So isolation can be really hard. I've sort of been through my fair share of it. In the last 8 years. And again, this sort of lifestyle that it's taken me some time to get used to. It used to be really hard for me. And now I've gotten to, I think, enjoy it. But there's some things that I learned from it, including like trying to find projects to do. I love doing projects around my house. If you can get yourself a circular saw, get yourself a good drill, get yourself a few other things. It's amazing the things you can make. Shelves or a headboard for your bed or, just various projects to improve your home. And in the deep winters, I think in Minnesota, I once was told it's a good time to sort of go inside yourself in a sense. It's an inside time, it's, summertime, a lot of times for being outside and expressing yourself and going to big events. And the wintertime, you don't have as many things like that. So it's time to sort of stay in and maybe think about your life, think about how you want to plan ahead, think about what you're doing, but also maybe try something that you don't normally do and get good at something else. And I said this to my son at the beginning of this whole thing. And, he could never beat me at ping pong. I grew up with 2 older brothers. We played ping pong all the time. And so I started my son at a fairly decent age, but he could never beat me. And we started playing at the beginning of this thing, 3 weeks ago. And I tried as hard as I could the other day, and he beat me in a 3-set nail biter because, he's sitting and he does his schoolwork and things like that. And it's, you can go sneak in a quick ping pong game for 45 minutes. We've been playing a lot is what I'm trying to say. So get good at something that you've never done before or that you are just okay at. One of those good times to do that. And it's probably a good, I don't know if a wake up call. It's like a big therapy session for our country of figuring out. And our country probably needs that. By the way, that's one thing I've always said to people. If like I magically was president of the United States, that one, we should make it less expensive for people to go to college and become therapists. And two, we should make therapy free for everybody like once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Just someone to go talk to help you figure out this problem you have, whatever it might be, an unbiased third party. I think in the United States and the whole world probably in a lot of ways is getting a sort of a therapy session right now.
Not bad thought.
And we've all been shocked into doing different things than we ever did before. Being alone is different. It's a different mindset. It's easy to get lonely. But we probably needed it. Probably good to slow down. And I got to feel that a lot of people will change the way they live after this thing is all over, and even just some small ways. And obviously, whether they're concerned going to stadium, those types of things, but just I think people will learn a lot about themselves and who they are, and it's a good time to sit back and have some slow down thought of who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, and why you do it, and I think our country is having that.
Sage, do you think you spoke about the NFL and the draft? Do you think how do you think the NFL's handling this virus? And should they have the draft? Should they keep talking about starting the season on time? And if they don't, what's that going to look like? Just a bunch of questions about how this situation affects the NFL.
And a quick side question, too. I wrote an article the other day. I know you on your Twitter get into politics from time to time. One of my majors from the U of M was political science, so it's hard for me to try to not at times like this talk about that, but you have a president who seemingly is obsessed with the NFL and talks about it more than any other president I think I can think of. The conference call with all the heads of commissioners of pro sports leagues or with horse racing conglomerates the other day, talking about maybe tax cuts for concession stands to get people into stadiums in September. Is that even something you think he should be focusing on right now?
The president about the fall?
Just looking at
let's
get people into the stadium before we even really have a sense as to what the hell's happening here.
Yeah, so I'm big with the Dr. Fauci scenario of like we cannot make the timeline here. We don't know. It is all fog out there, and to say what's going to happen in 4 or 5 months is just a guess. And the more we do now, the tighter and more disciplined we are now as a country. Like everybody has to be disciplined, which is like impossible in this country of like everyone wants to be free and no one can tell me what to do. But the more disciplined we are now, the better chance we do of having some sort of football or something like that. It's an absolute guess to say what's going to happen in the fall, how they're going to do it, much less if there's going to be 80,000 people in MetLife Stadium, or, how is that going to happen? What has to happen between now and then to get to that, point? There has to be all sorts of tests and it should be a situation where literally you take a test and then walk into the stadium. I gotta think. Who knows? But it just takes one person to infect a whole bunch of other people. That's the real challenge of it all. So I think trying to predict the future, trying to say, I think this is what's going to happen, is all just a guess. And you can't rely on any of it. No one knows what's going to happen. I think what good leaders do is they don't guess, is they prepare. And they work with the people who know these issues the most, and you have to rely on them. And that's what I go with. That is one thing that I have learned over the years is you have to rely on people who are quote unquote experts in what they do. I'm not a disease person. I don't know anything about viruses and bacteria and all these various things. I know they're different, but in medicines and whatever, not my expertise. It's not. You know what is my expertise? Quarterbacks. If you want to call me an expert at something, and I wouldn't even like to call my expert as being a quarterback, but I guess I'm probably one of a couple hundred people in the world who know as much about the position as I know, or the or offense and defense and protections and throwing motions and the quarterback. That's it. But don't come to me for well, I think the virus will be done by then, or we'll have the testing and the whatever in place that will allow us to fill up these stadiums, and we're going to do tax cuts for hot dogs. I mean,
okay, there goes the rest of the interview. That's all I have.
Well, I'm just saying that is. But I think for the president to say that, there's just he's somebody that just throws a lot of scenarios out there, and he goes, well, I don't know, I'm not a doctor. We'll see how it goes. I guess we'll have to talk. And then if he's right, he just takes all the credit. If he's wrong, he just acts like he didn't say it.
Yeah,
you nailed it.
He's right either way.
Must be
right.
Nice.
So. Right. So he never actually has. Then that's one of my issues with Donald Trump is that he never. You could call them lies, or sometimes in these scenarios you could call them like sort of they're all just Hail Marys, and if they get intercepted, it's the receiver's fault for not getting it. If it's a touchdown, what a great throw!
I like it.
And that's pretty much what we're doing in all these scenarios. And and like here's an example, and we'll get off the Corona thing in a second, but the hydrochloroquine type of thing. I think everybody's hopeful this thing helps be the medicine for people who got sick. But we hope that's the case. But we don't know. So we're sort of throwing a Hail Mary here, with spending a lot of money on it, giving it to people who, may not help. It may hurt. We don't know. We don't have the information. And until we have that information, we're just guessing.
But if it works, who's going to take credit?
But if it works, he gets all the credit. Well, and he's an investor in a company that makes it.
Just saw that.
I mean, isn't that just amazing, right? So, Hail Marys, I just don't see. I don't like leaders living off the Hail Mary. I don't like when football coaches do it. I don't like when presidents do it. I don't like when the CEO of a big company does it. Those don't work. And I don't want my guy who's an investment guy to go, here's the deal. We're going to take all your money and we're going to have 30 Hail Marys. We're just going to do these. We're going to buy a crap load of all these penny stocks. But if just one of them hits, I'm a genius.
Yeah.
And the other 20, so I don't want that. I don't want any of that. I want consistency. I want facts.
Clause, I thought.
But then it looks like none of that stuff even matters. And so I tell you whatever happens with government in general going forward. Now we're on this deal, but I think everybody will agree there has to be a whole new rule book written for people in Congress, for people in senators, for the president, for all these people and money and business and who can make money. Obviously, we know all the stories about the various senators and Congress people who sold stocks when they got these reports in late January, early February, but no one else knew anything for a month, and here they are buying up PPE stuff. I mean, just criminal. Yeah. Just criminal. And we have to put the public servant aspect back. We got to put the public back into it.
Yeah. Right.
It's not about, privately making my own money. We got to put, so I'm hoping that this time the pandemic's been very revealing in a lot of ways.
It has been.
And I think we've seen about our friends and family and who takes this thing seriously, who has self-discipline, who can look at the world bigger than themselves, and that realize that we are all connected. We just are. We're 7 billion people floating around in space on this rock that has just the right amount of this, that, and the other for us to be here and to talk. I mean, all these this crazy world, and we're all connected. We're not like just all a bunch of individuals trying to get our own here. And I look at it as like, in America, we're 99% individuals, but we have to realize we're 1% connected. Yeah. And I think that's where you have to, I think scientists and those types of people should be, have a say more in our politics going forward, because we are connected. And it's not just about us all trying to make as much money as possible.
Definitely. You mentioned, having played for Lafleur and Kubiak. Yeah. There's something in regards to the Diggs trade that's always kind of bothered me in the lead up to it, and now that it became a reality, in that in a system like Kubiak's, the quote-unquote two tight end system, that it's superfluous to have two elite wide receivers in Thielen and Diggs, or you could look at Thomas and Sanders during his time in Denver. Is that something that we should use as like a comforting blanket for next season, saying, well, they have Irv Smith Jr., they have Kyle Rudolph, therefore Diggs' production would have been limited anyway, assuming Thielen is, going to bounce back, be healthy for the full year with his hammy? Or is that, the numbers I looked at from Kubiak's career and going back to 2015 with those two receivers, it didn't really seem like that was the case, that there were two tight ends getting enough balls to negate those other two receivers. In 2015, it seemed like 67% of the passes were thrown to one of those two receivers. So I was wondering, even though I just loaded this question up with tons of bias, what your thoughts were on that, or the Diggs trade in general, in its impact on the offense.
Well, one, Stephon Diggs is a really, really good wide receiver. One of the better ones in the NFL. He does a lot of things well. He's extremely quick. He's a very good route runner. He can get separation on short stuff or shallow crossing routes or a quick stick route. He has the top end speed to be a guy that runs post routes and really just can run away from people. Doesn't have to really put a move on them, just outruns people. So he has the ability to be quick and fast. And for a guy that's not 6'4", he does a really good job of the one-on-one balls on the outside. He has sort of the ability to play almost like a tall guy. So he really is sort of the full package. But for whatever reason, he wasn't happy in Minnesota. I don't think anyone really knows the details of that. Was it a relationship with Zimmer? Was it the style of the offense he didn't like? Was it the quarterback he didn't like? What is his quarterback's coach? Was this contract? We really don't know all those details. And I think there's a lot of it. So either way, the team knew it wasn't working out either. The good thing for the Vikings is, yes, they gave up a really, really good player or a great player in this league. But they did get a lot of compensation back. And this team does need a whole bunch of starters. I would look at it right now. It needs 4 starters, 2 corners, a defensive end, and the other wide receiver, and really maybe even a third wide receiver. I guess we sort of have a 3-4 guy now. But this team has some spots to fill for sure. Yeah, and always, obviously the offensive line. And so this team needed football players, not a football player. So that's the issue. That's the sort of the breakdown, I think, of that trade. And I thought, it's not great for the Vikings to lose a great player, but at least you got good compensation back. It wasn't some scenario where everyone was screaming unhappy and they had to give them up for a 3rd-round draft pick or something like that, right? So, yeah. But having said that, they do need another wide receiver. I'd actually liked what BC did last year. Quality player. I think he's sort of what you're looking for. You do one of two things with a late draft pick, which he was. You either go off a guy with that looks like he has some real talent, but for various negatives, as in like off the field troubles or bad injuries or bad recommendations from his college coach because he's a jerk or whatever. These guys, and with maybe a 1st or 2nd round type of talent, they fall to the 5th, 6th, 7th round. That's one type. So very talented, lots of baggage. The other aspect of guys that fall are guys with very little baggage that are just consistent, solid, college players. They don't have 4.35 speed. They're not huge. They're not, but they have a lot of the sort of the intangible stuff you don't have to worry about. And I think I look at BC Johnson as that. I don't think he's a super explosive player. I don't look at him as a starter. At least I didn't from last year. We'll see how the year off of growth could occur. But he's one of those guys that could be that third guy, that fourth guy. If you go 4 wide receivers, he can be any of those positions. It seems like to me, he's just going to be one of those good, solid, sort of a Jarius Wright, type of player. And I liked Jarius. And Jarius is more of a slot guy. And BC, I think, is probably a little bit more of an outside, maybe a little bit of both. But I don't see him as a starter per se. Just like I didn't really see Jarius as a starter, but a great guy to have on your roster.
What about Irv Smith?
And an important guy to have on your team. Irv Smith Jr., I think I'm very excited about. If Kyle Rudolph wasn't on this team, he'd be a starter. And he's a good run blocker, and he's got some athletic ability and quickness in the passing game. And that is one thing that Kyle doesn't have. He doesn't have the vertical threat. He doesn't have the ability to get great separation. He's got great feel, and he's unbelievably in the red zone, in particular inside the 10-yard line. Kyle's as good as there is in the league. So he has value in different aspects. But it is nice, the Kubiak tight ends and Pens in general, to have those guys that can beat one-on-one coverage, that can work their way down the field, a little more quickness than what Rudy can give you. And I think Irv Smith has that. I think he will get better and better and better. You can see the physical talents. And what's obviously it's nice about that, a lot of times the better pass catching wide receiver you are, the worse run blocker you are. But from what I've seen, he's a very good run blocker, in particular for a rookie, which is sort of a whole new experience a lot of times for sometimes college tight ends, is to really get good with technique and run blocking. I think coming from Alabama and Nick Saban, and obviously the way they like to run the football there, I think he was probably pretty well coached in college because he brings it pretty good. So that's a full tight end, a guy that can run block well, can pass block decently, but also is a real threat in the passing game. So it's an important part of it. Having 2 tight ends, actually having 3 tight ends, if not even 4, to be honest with you, on the roster. But having 2 tight ends in the game does this. When you line up in what we call solo right, or as you look at a TV screen, it's receivers out wide, 2 tight ends next to the tackles, one on each side, and 1 tailback in the backfield, right? We've all seen that look before. Well, when you run the outside zone, which we all know Kubiak likes to run, okay, the tackle has a one-on-one block basically with the defensive end in a sense, if there's no tight end there, okay? If there's a tight end there, it allows the tackle and the tight end to double team that defensive end as they work their way up to go to the linebacker, what they call like a tray block, okay, between a tight end and a tackle. It makes the job of the tackle much easier. Those defensive ends are great athletes. And for you to come off the ball and not swing and miss and whiff on a defensive end, it occurs sometimes. Having that tight end there allows that sort of double team to occur and just makes everyone's job a lot easier. And you get good push. You also get good sell for any sort of play action down the field when the tight end is blocking just like the run to the side of the play action. And so there's a real value there of that combination block, and then what it opens up for all the other aspects of the passing game. So having 2 tight ends to be able to run the ball to the left or to the right or to the play action to either side, that's very, very important in this style of offense.
Sage, you brought up your story in SI that kind of launched your writing career. I just wanted to say, not right now during this self-quarantine, self-isolation, everybody's running old games on TV, and I didn't go back and watch the 2009 NFC Championship. I went back and got your story, and I recommend everybody doing so that hasn't read it. You talk about the game and that season and with Favre, and you talk in the story about Favre. It's very interesting. You say he goes by feel and creates to get what he wants instead of doing everything by the book and getting what the defense will give him. Most coaches will cringe at what he does because it isn't very coachable, but that's Brett Favre. That tells me that every quarterback is not created the same. I mean, he's different in his approach than you are. the gunslinger mentality. What does that say about Kirk Cousins in your analysis of him? I mean, because every quarterback has their attributes, and Favre is one way, and there's good and bad with that. We saw what happened in that game. Can you talk to that and tell me about the different mentality that quarterbacks bring to the position and how that affects your team and your game?
Yeah. So I like comparing quarterbacks sometimes to point guards. And I'm trying to think of 2 point guards. John Paxson. You remember John Paxson, Chicago Bulls?
Absolutely.
He was, I guess you consider him the point guard.
Yes.
But his job really was to deliver the ball to the really good athletes, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and then be there for when they created a situation for them to hit the open shot. And John Paxson was pretty good at hitting the open shot. All right. Kirk Cousins is pretty good at hitting the open shot for the most part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does he create though? Okay. What was White Chocolate's name? The point guard for
Williams, Jason Williams.
Jason Williams. Okay. Or Steve Nash. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Also point guards, but they create offense, and they also create the ability to. Steph Curry. Steph Curry not only hits the open shot and hits the long open shot, but he also creates for other people. Okay. So he does a lot more than John Paxson does as a point guard. Steph Curry does what Pat Mahomes does. He hits the open shot and creates when things break down and makes other people better around them. Favre, going back to the original question, Favre didn't just sort of execute and hit the open shot. He created offense. He also did just hit the open shot when it was open, of course. But he could at other times create shots. You're like, man, how did he's getting double teamed and he created a shot, That's something that Favre would do in football as a quarterback. He would sort of get people open, or he would make a D lineman miss, or he would use his eyes to move a linebacker to throw it on the other. So, a linebacker would drop back into the hole and Favre would move the linebacker himself, right? He wouldn't go, okay, the linebacker's deep, I'm going to check it down to the running back. He'd go, okay, the linebacker's deep, but if I look over here to my right, he'll go there, then I'm going to throw it basically blind to my left on the other side of the guy's ear as my receiver runs into the hole that the guy was supposed to cover. That's what Favre would do a lot of times, and more times than probably a game than I did almost any time in my career, is to sort of get receivers open with his body language and his eyes.
That's a special talent. I mean, can Kirk get better at that? Can he learn to do that better and use his body language to create some offense, or is he just who he is?
He is who he is. I don't think he would operate well. It's not his personality. I think if a lot of times things like that are personality. This is the aspect of physical talent that's different than personality talent. And I look at Kirk as a very structured person who likes things a certain way, and he operates really well when there is a sort of consistent path and a consistent game plan and play and reasons why it should work and doesn't work. And this is my timing and my footwork. He does very good within that structure. I call him an execution quarterback. And those types of players don't do well in sort of the gunslinger type of thought process. They actually can't. They actually I don't think they can actually make that switch. Maybe sometimes, when you're losing by 17 points and you're out there and you sort of say, screw this, I don't care anymore. And that, I think, Favre just had that probably from a really young, it's just how he always played football. I think it's sort of how Tony Romo played also, but probably because he grew up watching Favre. I think it's why Aaron Rodgers is who he was at his height of his best years, because he also watched Favre early in his career. And you sort of say, wow, you can actually do that. You can be that type of player. Cousins was trained at a very early age, one at Michigan State, which was not a gunslinger type of school. And then comes to Kyle Shanahan's offense And he's more of an execution style coordinator. He can get a lot of quarterbacks to do a pretty good job of executing based off all these rules. There's not a lot of gunslinger in that. So it's just not sort of who he is. I don't think he has a skill set to do it. I don't think he's a good enough athlete to be that type of quarterback either.
Fantastic.
This will be my final question. I was going to forego it, but you kind of touched on it, hence my entirely professional. I wrote a lot of articles last season that caught the ire of the roving Lord of the Rings eye of Packers fans about the decline of Aaron Rodgers. And as a guy who's obviously got a very unique perspective on the position, what do you attribute that to? Is it solely a physical thing with him having, broken both clavicles, or, a lot of people in Green Bay blamed McCarthy. LaFleur is going to be the savior to get him to the Tom Brady 7,000 yards a season quote that he said about Rodgers. What do you see in him that has taken him from his peak?
Well, no. Okay, so here's a couple things I see. One, he is 36 years old, I believe, or almost 30, right? He's 36, 37 years old. He's older. Yeah. I definitely know when I reached 30 years old, I remember working out. I turned 30, 31. It was in an off season, and I just didn't feel the sort of the bounce in my step as much as I just, I was doing these agility drills or these quickness drills or whatever. I just didn't feel like I had sort of that quick twitch that I maybe had just a couple years earlier. And now, of course, that does occur as that sort of that quick twitch, a little bit of the strength, it just does go away as you get into your mid to high 30s, for sure. I mean, that's just sort of a fact, unless you're taking like growth hormone or something like that, right? So you naturally are going to be a little bit less of an athlete, not quite as strong, and you can't do all the physical things you did when you were younger. Well, Rodgers, he also can't do all those things he did when he was young. He can still do a lot of them. I mean, it's amazing how good he still is. I think he's still a very good player, but just what he was doing when he was 9 years old, 28, was some of the highest level football that the National Football League has ever seen. Wow. Like some of the highest window, like that I think now Pat Mahomes is now at, or maybe sometimes surpassing, is like seeing the position played like I'd never seen them before. Right. Tom, played this at a really, really high level. Brady for dang near 20 years. It's just incredible how long he's done it for at a very good level. Rodgers, I think, did it at a higher level for a number of years, a higher ceiling. But it's hard to be a great athlete quarterback for a really long time. That's why, Breeze is still playing because he doesn't run around and try to be a playmaker. He's a lot more of an executor also. As is Brady. Brady's a great executor, not this crazy playmaker type of quarterback. But Rodgers' game, a lot of it was making a lot of great plays. We saw him run around all the time. And I still think some of his downside is he still tries to do that, but he just physically doesn't. He's just not quite as quick and doesn't have quite the arm strength and his body. Maybe he believes his body can do a little bit more than it can do. I still think he's a really, really, really good quarterback. I mean, listen, guys, 26 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Would we not take that every single year for the rest of time by any Vikings quarterback? We absolutely would. The year before, he was 25-2.
Wow.
He's thrown 6 interceptions in the last 2 years.
So he's not done yet.
His quarterback rating is still around 95. He does throw the ball away a lot. He doesn't throw very many interceptions. That does kill. He takes a lot of sacks. He takes way too many sacks. But he likes to hold onto the ball to try to make plays. But if you look at the difference between last year and this year, it's that those sack numbers were down. They were down 13. They ran the ball more. they should run the ball more. I love the fact that I actually said this to Matt LaFleur back last summer at a football camp that he came to that I'm a part of in Los Angeles. And I was like, I like Aaron under center more. Early in his career, I thought he was under center a lot. They do a lot of action in Green Bay. They double move with Jordy Nelson or someone deep down the field. And he had that arm to heave it 65 yards. And I think he still does have a pretty dang good arm. So he can still make a lot of those throws. Having a running game makes life easier in a quarterback. Play action is easy on a quarterback. Bootlegs, they're easier on a quarterback. The hardest place to be is a pocket passing quarterback, always in the pocket, no play action, holding on the ball in shotgun for 4 or 5 seconds. That's the hardest thing to do as a quarterback, as an offensive line. A lot of bad things can happen in those scenarios. So I think why the Packers were better this year, even though Rodgers' numbers weren't better per se, is because they relied on him less. And I think that's good. He also, and I love Alan Lazard because he's an Iowa State guy, but he was an undrafted free agent. He's a 4.55 guy or something like that. He's a big-bodied receiver, but he is not, some, first-team All-Pro. Devontae Adams is a really good player, but they don't really have a true number 2 guy. I don't think over there, and so he's dealing with a lack of weapons as well. But I tell you what, they're winning football games, and I think Matt LaFleur did a really, really good job. And I think Rodgers having LaFleur as a coach, it's a very similar offense to what we see with Garrett Kubiak. And I think Rodgers should become more of a quarterback that works within an offense instead of trying to be the offense completely by himself all the time. And he did that for too many years at the end of that Mike McCarthy era.
Definitely.
Great stuff.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on the show. I feel like we might have to do a part 2 to this in the very near future because
Thanks for talking football with us. Thanks for talking football. We loved it.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal, guys. The one thing about football, and it is ever changing. And I think the one thing that, and I do enjoy watching film. It's nice to really watch what happened and sort of see what the announcers may have gotten to see. Watching football from an actual TV perspective for me is the worst way to watch it. I only can see so much. The angles aren't good to see what actually happened, whose fault it was. But it's something that, for the most part, over time, the very basics of football don't change. The leverage, the angles, the gap responsibilities, how coverages sort of work and why, and those things, those fundamentals of the game do not change. And all that much. And so that's, again, that's one reason that it's, I enjoy, watching that and it's my way of sort of being a part of the game without having to, be in coaching and working 100 hours a week during the fall, which doesn't sound all that fun to me.
All right, man. Well, again, we really, really appreciate it. It's been great chatting with you, and hopefully we'll be able to chat more with you in the near future.
Great stuff, Sage. Thanks so much for coming by.
Sounds good, fellas. I really appreciate you having me on, and be safe out there. Do your part. We're all in this together, and I'm going to do my job, just like what Bill Belichick says. Do your job. I'm doing my job. So
that's right.
Hopefully some of the fans out there enjoyed the show.
Definitely.
Absolutely. All right. Joe, you want to take her home?
Yeah, so actually I haven't announced this yet, so just letting people know. Chad Greenway will be on the show Thursday, I believe, at 9:30. He hasn't confirmed yet, but that's why we were off last week. We were going to do a Grey Duck Vodka Greenway episode. I think that'll be appearance number 4 for him. But we pushed it to this week, so we do have some topics left on the agenda. I say we, for the most part, should push those to Thursday. But there was something that I just saw in my feed this morning that I wanted to get your take on, Joe. It sounds like the NFL competition committee is not going to be renewing the pass interference replay moving forward. So I think it looks like that'll be a one and done thing from the 2019 season. I think there's nobody out there saying no about that. It seemed like the most microcosm of the NFL's management or lack thereof thing ever. It was ambiguous. It rolled out strangely. Nobody was on the same page. Coaches were throwing flags in preseason games just to see how the refs would implement a rule. It didn't seem like the refs were really across the board sure what to do, at least at first. It slowed games way down into baseball territory, which nobody likes. And so it's a relief, I think. You know how I am, Joe, with that.
I think we saw how the refs handled it, and they kind of sent a pretty strong signal how they were going to handle it. And therefore, we kind of saw this coming, I believe. I guess I felt that way. I mean, they let it be known they're not gonna overturn things that unless they're so egregious, unless they're like the one that happened to the Saints 2 years ago. So it's not a shock, and it is what it is. We go back to normal, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed like that Saints call or lack thereof was something that happens once a decade, and to slow every single game down for something that happens once a decade just seemed egregious. But like I always say, if there's anything rule-wise that can change that can negatively impact the Vikings, I usually say don't do it, because I can just see it in my mind somehow hurting the Vikings' Super Bowl chances at some point. What's your take on this trade for Odell Beckham Jr. stuff? And then we'll leave it at that.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. So there's was an article written on a competing website that the Vikings should trade for Odell Beckham Jr. He's trying to force his way out of Cleveland. As everyone knows, last season he essentially looked at the camera and said, "Get me out of here." Any other team, competing teams?
I'm not going to put anything into that. There's always drama around receivers, and people are going to squawk. He's got a new coach, a new regime there, and he's going to give that a chance before he goes anywhere. They've put a lot of pieces in place already, and they're going to get some draft choices. I think he'd be really, really bad to do that, to make that move right now. So I don't see it happening at all. And the Vikings, A, probably can't afford his contract, and B, they don't want the headaches.
There you go. People think because Zimmer's in his last year of his contract, he's going to do some blockbuster move, but I think we've seen that blockbuster move, which is rebuilding the defense, and that's apparently what we're going to see in the draft, which is rescheduled for its original date. It'll be virtual over the phone. That makes sense. It'll be just interesting to see, though, how they do that from a schematic standpoint. I think they said there's 50 different players. They're going to have camera crews at their house filming their reaction. We'll see. People should stay tuned. Every year, or for the last 2 years anyway, we've done a day 2 draft party in person. The first one was at Town Hall at Seven Corners near downtown. The second one was out in Prior Lake last year at a really nice golf course that was carrying great vodka, hence the location choice. We're going to try to do something virtual alongside the NFL online. What that will be, I have not determined yet, but I will figure that out, and then we'll be promoting it on the show and then on the websites VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com. But definitely tune in on Thursday when we chat with Chad. I will get out on social media the exact time. It'll be either 9:30 or 10:30. I'm based on the conversations I've had with him. And I appreciate everyone tuning in to the show this week.
What a great conversation with Sage. Boy, I'd love to have him back. Man, oh man, he knows what he's talking about. That's just great stuff.
Isn't it? I could not even, from a show perspective, just pick his brain for hours. That was really.
We didn't even touch on everything we wanted to. So you got to get him back.
Yeah, we'll get him back. But yeah, this has been Morning Joe's for April 7th, 2020. We will see you guys on the flip side / Thursday.